guys, it's Sam, and this is my spoiler-free review of The Fate of the Tearling by Erika Johansson. This is the third and final book in the Tearling trilogy. I have done reviews for the first two books in the series, so I will link those on the screen. If you haven't read those, there might be spoilers for those within this review, since this is the last book, so I will link those on the screen just in case, so you can check those out if you don't want to be spoiled at all for those. So this picks up directly after the events of the last book, and Kelsey is being taken by the Red Queen and her people into their land, and she is struggling with figuring out what to do about that, and we also get to follow multiple other characters that are either trying to get her back, what's going on in the Tearling, what's going on with the Red Queen, what's going on with some of the antagonists, and also what's going on in the past, because Kelsey is still getting flashbacks to a different person than she got in the second book, back to the past and the making of the Tearling. So this was a book that I put off for quite some time, not because I didn't want to read it, but because I didn't own it, and also this is a very polarizing finale, and I'm very able to see why, and I will talk about that in this review. So first off, when we talk about the world building, this book is really about the wrapping up of the histories of the world and the characters. So we get a wrap up of how the characters kind of got here as far as the world of the Tearling through the flashbacks that she gets, and kind of what happened to set off the decline into what we have now, because we obviously learned in the last book that they came over from our world, our future. So it's how did we end up in this medieval feeling fantasy setting? So we get the answers to that. We also get the answers to a lot of the past with some of the other characters, like the Red Queen, like some of the other antagonists, and all of that. So we kind of are able to wrap all of that up for ourselves, which is really kind of nice to have all these arcs kind of completed and no serious questions left hanging as far as some of those historical pieces. But the magic in here continues to just be very unclear and vague, and that's okay with me in this instance. This world is very, I'll talk about this more, but this world is just very uncomfortable. It doesn't let you get comfortable. It doesn't answer all of your questions. So to have a magic system that's still kind of is fine for me. Next, I'm going to talk about our characters. Kelsey as a main character has always been one of my favorites in all of the fantasy series that I've read. What I really enjoy about her, carrying on from the second book into this book, is she is constantly fighting with her own vengeful nature. She has sort of named that part of herself as the Queen of Spades, and is constantly fighting with that part of her personality can be useful, but it can't be used all the time, because then she would turn into the villains that she hates. And how does she balance this, and how is she a good leader? And she really hasn't been a leader for that long. This book reminds you over and over that she really wasn't leading. I think it was 6 months or something. She really has not been a leader for very long. So we really have Kelsey figuring out how she wants to be a ruler, and how she wants to be a ruler long term, and kind of looking at her own mistakes and her missteps and how that affects people, and coming to terms with the fact that she's not going to be perfect, but doing the best she can. And I really enjoy that struggle of Kelsey not being this truly good or really bad. I wouldn't consider her morally gray either, but she's just very real and very human and very flawed, and I really like that about her. There's also a lot of themes of sacrifice with characters, and what characters want to sacrifice themselves. Do they want to sacrifice each other? What do they do to hold on to their power? All those kinds of political questions that we have. I also deeply enjoy the connection that Kelsey has with the various antagonists in the story. Yes, there are villains, but in a lot of ways these characters feel so, again, human. They have this level of, even if they're despicable, they have this level of you kind of get to see how they got there a bit, with a few exceptions. And I really enjoy that. Our character of the Red Queen throughout the series has had this layer of humanity added to her, which I find really interesting, because at the beginning you feel like she's going to be Kelsey's polar opposite, and you sort of learn over time that she's not. And they do have this connection and are each other's mirrors, and that's been something that I've enjoyed throughout the story. And also just, again, how all of the other antagonists sort of relate to Kelsey. Lastly, we talk about the plot. Kind of like I said with the second book, but this series is so not what I expected it to be when I first read the first book. The first book is so fantasy that by the time we get to this book, it does feel so different from the first book, but I do really like that it feels true for the series. I mean, this definitely feels like a conclusion of what we got from the second book. This is not a comfortable world. This is not a world that gives you all of the answers. There are still things left kind of hanging at the end, and it's not wrapped up in a pretty bow, but that feels so right for this series. But I also understand that that is why this series is so polarizing. Especially if people love the first book, which I did love the first book too, but especially if you love the first book, it's just this is not what I signed up for necessarily, but I still do really appreciate what this does. There were a ton of themes though in this that were uncomfortable to read in our present time, of just seeing a society that tried to be better and people just ended up falling back to what they've always done, and some of that is just like, ugh, I don't want to read about that. So some of that was hard, but it still is a world that doesn't want you to sit and be comfortable. It wants you to be uncomfortable, and it challenges the reader continuously. The ending did feel a little bit rushed. Like the very, very end, there was just like a lot that happened, and it just rushed to the end, and then it was over. And so that felt a little bit unsatisfying. But this is an ending that is unsatisfying, but feels correct for the series. That is very bizarre, and again, why I know a lot of people didn't like this finale, because it is unsatisfying, but the unsatisfying nature of this for this whole series and what the series has given us feels correct for this particular story. Overall, I did enjoy this. It wasn't my favorite. I didn't love it as much as I loved the first book. I mean, putting that out there, but I still really enjoyed a lot of the themes. I enjoyed what it was doing. I enjoyed what it tried to do. I enjoyed the writing still, and this was just a very unique series that I really haven't read anything else like it. This combination of like sort of sci-fi with fantasy in this way is something that I've never read before. So I did end up enjoying this, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So I will be doing a spoilery gush on this book, and I will link that on the screen if you've read this book and want to check it out. So comment down below, let me know your thoughts on The Fate of the Tearling. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye.